Hey everyone, this is Dr. Fox. Thank you all for your continued support, and thank you to my Podbean patrons for helping me to continue CRPN Central's podcast. For more information about our mission, please contact us today at info@crpaynet.com for details.
Hey sites, hello. We're here to help you guys. When it comes to our study, we want to give you everything you need to succeed. You want the best recruiters? You got it. You want the best EMR scrubber services to find the best patients? Here you go. We're going to spare no expense. You know why? Because you're worth it.
Thank you for your support. Can we get paid now?
We want our trial performed ASAP. We want it done, like yesterday. We'll pay for whatever it takes. The state-of-the-art EMR, the electronics, the wearables, the software. Don't worry, we got this.
Okay, so can we have our money now for our services?
Hey sites, what gives? We literally give you all the resources, everything you could ever dream of, and yet your performance sucks. Make it make sense. We spared no expense. We pumped so much into you. And where's the data we need for our trial? Not here, that's where.
You give us the best state-of-the-art tools this industry can find. You throw away millions of dollars away from the patient for your convenience, and you berate us. And yet, while you spare no expense, you are 6 months late on your bills. We've been shouldering debt since we started this business relationship with you, and frankly, your PAC score was terrible for the exact same reasons we experienced.
Site payments. What are those? Sorry guys, but that's not our job. That's the CRO's job. We spared no expense to hire them. So talk to them. That sounds like a them problem.
Clients, so you want better recruitment, faster trial timelines, and dedicated quality in your trials. Pay your damn sites before you spring for sexy bells and whistles. And I bet you'll have an immediate ROI. You're building beautiful state-of-the-art skyscrapers on sand, clients, and it will never hold until you get back to the basics. It's not patentable, it's not exciting, and it's not profitable. It's common sense. And sometimes I don't think we have much of it left. Welcome to CRPN Central, the official podcast of the Clinical Research Payment Network. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Fox. CRPN Central discusses the real issues with our clinical research industry to explore and identify mutually beneficial solutions for all of our stakeholders. Technology innovation and development is increasing exponentially throughout the clinical research industry. From EMR and automation to artificial intelligence and virtual options, vendors continue to create new opportunities to advance how we deliver clinical trials. As much as we try, however, sites don't seem to adopt or utilize the latest technologies the industry has to offer. Why do we continue to live in an archaic operational landscape with so many progressive opportunities available to improve our industry? Today's episode will discuss technology development and adoption in clinical research, meaning the creation and application of innovative scientific solutions for the advancement of clinical trial performance compared to the widespread logistical decisions to take up and utilize such advancements. First, we will speak with an innovator who is dedicated to developing site-centric and controlled technology solutions. Then, we will speak with an experienced programmer who has developed and championed decades of technology solutions. To maintain valid comparisons, both interviews will utilize the same questions, and my guests did not know the questions before the interviews. After the interviews, we will compare each guest's answers and opinions, and perhaps explore possibilities and solutions to help our industry progress its development and adoption in the future. Our first guest is a prominently known site advocate and software leader in the industry. Rick Greenfield is the president and founder of Real-Time Software Solutions, a leading software organization dedicated to creating comprehensive solutions for site convenience and efficiency. Rick has also co-owned and managed multi-specialty research sites for nearly 13 years, and he continually shows our industry his directives and innovations are fully engaged to consider site frontline logistics and need. Please welcome with me Mr. Rick Greenfield. Mr. Rick Greenfield, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central today.
Dr. Fox, glad to be here. Thanks for having me join and look forward to talking with you today.
Rick, I am a huge fan of what you've done for this industry. For anyone who doesn't know Rick Greenfield, would you be willing to give us a brief introduction?
Sure. Yeah, I started in 2001. Well, actually, my mom got me into the industry because she was a registered nurse that started a clinical research site. Wanted me to come join as I was finishing up my business degree in information systems. So we started with 3 employees and over the years grew it into one of the largest multi-specialty standalone clinical research sites in the country. As we grew, we needed an information system to help us manage our business. Ultimately, again, with my background in information systems, decided to build something. And then fast forward to really 2013 when we had a product that we brought to the market, which was the initial real-time CTMS. And it's actually kind of funny to think about what real-time CTMS is today compared to what we came to the market with. Now, there's still a lot more left to do, in my opinion. And since I left the site world, my goal has been to do nothing but improve business operations for sites and give them tools that help them be more successful. And that's something I don't really ever plan to shy away from at Real-Time. Now, we may, as you and I discussed in a prior conversation, Real-Time is starting to look at developing some sponsor CRO solutions, but those solutions tie into all of the other solutions that we've created around sites and really trying to create a true ecosystem that I hope someday is a utopian state where we have sponsor systems and site systems that are vendor agnostic, but are able to talk to each other and share data and deliverables with each other that give the sponsors the tools that they need, but let the sites also have the tools that they need to be successful. And it's really just a connecting of those systems to allow us to share data effectively.
One of my favorite parts about your story is that you literally came into an industry, you saw a problem, you identified that nobody else was doing it, and you stood up and you fixed it. And I think that's a true entrepreneur style. And I appreciate what you do for our sites.
Well, I appreciate the perspective, but as I mentioned, to me, we're just scratching the surface at what really needs to be accomplished. And I think that some of the newer things that we're doing is looking at bringing participants into our technology on a much greater level and really valuing their commitment and what they do for clinical trials. We really want to make it a win-win-win, as we like to say, a win for the sites, a win for the sponsors, and a win for the patients too.
Mm-hmm. Almost like an ecosystem with all of the stakeholders.
Yes, but I think one big difference, if I may, is that I'm trying to make sure that we're not approaching it from a single vendor perspective. It's a much more challenging strategy. Of course, the other big challenge in that is it's not just on us to develop these strategies and these solutions. We have to have partners on the other side of the fence, sometimes even our competitors that are willing to come up with standardized ways of communicating and connecting these technologies together. But to me, that is the holy grail of making our industry work. You can just kind of sit back and think about how are we going to make all of these different sponsors and CROs and all these thousands and thousands of sites and tens of thousands of studies all work together. And it's got to be done through interconnectivity. Yes, we are wanting to build a great palette of solutions for our site customers, and we want to build other solutions for the participants and the sponsors, but really keeping interconnectivity in mind and interconnectivity to other vendors as well in mind.
Today's episode is about technology development and adoption in clinical research. It seems like there's always a new kind of technology. We've got the innovation in the industry. The uptake, however, seems to be limited sometimes. I have a list of questions for you, and I ask these questions questions to the previous interviewee, and we're going to compare the answers afterward. My first question to you is, do you see a reluctance in technology adoption on the clinical site level?
I would say overall, no. I don't believe that sites are reluctant to bring technology in-house that's going to help them be more successful and more efficient, do a better job. I think the resistance is technology that's being given to them, or I would even use the term forced upon them by the folks that they're working with, that doesn't work for their processes, doesn't drive efficiency, doesn't help them stay accountable to regulatory compliance. If you can only imagine, and I know you don't have to imagine it because I know you've lived it, having to log into so many different systems. And for this study, we're using this technology. And for that study, we're using that technology. Just learning all these technologies and then having to actually be efficient with them and manage successful processes that drive regulatory compliance, if nothing else, that make sure that we're following good GCPs and FDA regulations. It doesn't work. Yeah, absolutely. There's a resistance to it. And at the end of the day, I don't think it provides the best deliverable to the sponsors and the CROs that are pushing it onto them.
From a lot of the sites that I've talked to, they say, oh yeah, here's our systems. This is what we're doing. It's all paper source. It's all in a binder. Or we are doing all of our budgeting and contracting on Excel spreadsheets to track all of our trials. And you look at them and you say, this is how people used to do things in 2001. There are better solutions now. And their response is, we're always in survival mode. We're just trying to make payroll. We can't think about innovation because we don't have the money to invest in innovation. It's just that they don't have a margin. Everything they do is underfunded because of the way contracts are and the way they have to chase their money. Another, I call it talk-down tech, the technology that's forced upon sites on behalf of sponsors and CROs. I recall one situation in particular where there was a CRO that came in and they built it into their CTA that the site will utilize that CRO's technology platform. But what was interesting is the CRO baked their technology into the CTA, and then the sponsor's lawyers said, we will not be responsible for this technology. And then the CRO said, we will not be responsible for this technology. So therefore, sponsor and CRO both made site liable for the technology that CRO was forcing on them. So it was this really weird indemnification catch-22. And it resulted in the site not accepting the trial because
good for them.
The contract would have made them accept liability for things that they could not control.
Definitely, my hat's off to the site for recognizing that that's not something you should be agreeing to. Good for them for walking away from that. I think to your other point, though, around the cost, I would love to make the argument to you or anybody else that the solutions, at least that Real-Time provides, are going to ultimately make you money. Yes, they're going to cost you money, but they're going to make you money. When you look at the efficiencies that you're bringing to the staff and the physicians, they easily pay for themselves and I believe actually improve profitability.
Will you walk me through your understanding of the steps that are required for successful technology development and adoption in research?
One, it always helps if you have a really good understanding of the industry itself and have walked in those shoes. And so I think that's where I have an advantage in a lot of cases is, I've literally been in my customer's shoes. And so I think that's what you've also seen with CTMS companies that have come and gone is that the people that were really bringing those solutions didn't understand the challenges and the customers as well as they needed to build a solution that was going to work when you put it in their hands. So I think that as long as you, one, hopefully have some true experience, but if nothing else, you're a great listener and you can understand the needs and the problems, then you can develop a tool that solves those problems and get that delivered. The adoption can still be challenging for some of the other reasons that we're talking about. While sites may be concerned on whether or not they can afford it, or it may be that the sponsors are pushing other things down to them and they're just not really sure if they should have their own technology or should they rely upon this other technology that ultimately their customers are asking them to use. The real concern, I think, with a lot of sites is, will my sponsors allow me to use my own technology? If I invest in this, am I actually even going to be able to use it?
That's a very, very good point. So there's almost like a level of risk involved in the investment of technology on risk of acceptance.
So I think with any industry, there's going to be different barriers to getting people to adopt new technologies. Is it going to be something that's accepted? Can I afford it? Should I rely on other technologies that are being, again, quote unquote, forced upon me? So those are, I think, some of the primary reasons that we're all kind of sitting back and wondering, where is the pendulum going to swing? And what is going to be that utopian state? And should I invest in what I believe in today? Or do I need to wait a little longer and see what happens?
And my My favorite part about that answer was you started at the roots. If you have an understanding of the problem, then you are more likely to create a better solution. As far as that goes to adoption, sometimes I feel like if you have demonstrated that you are in the shoes of the people you're trying to help, they're more likely to adopt what you're developing.
Well, and you actually bring up another point. This is the reason why top-down tech doesn't work and why sponsor-delivered solutions oftentimes do not meet the needs of the sites, is that those solutions were really built for the sponsors to solve their problems. They don't necessarily understand. And I tell you what, I go to conferences, I talk to sponsor-level people all the time, or CRO folks that have maybe never lived in the shoes of a site person, and they just don't understand the concerns and the issues that sites have and the challenges that they have. And so therefore the solutions that they're providing and pushing down to the sites really don't function in that environment and don't solve the problems that the site staff really need.
And that may actually be a really good reason for the disconnect between the development that we have in our technology and the adoption by the sites.
Yeah, but even if the technologies were all great, the fact that you're having to use different technologies on every study because you're working with different sponsors and CROs that are pushing down different tech stacks to you, that alone makes it a losing situation for the sites.
I think that sites are near breaking points. We're seeing a degradation of site utilization for tech because they just can't do this anymore. Where do you think this industry is going to go as far as the future of technology?
Number one, technology will prevail. Technology will be adopted. So the question really to me is not if we're going to adopt technology, it's what technology are we going to adopt. So my vision, I haven't had any reason to doubt it. Each stakeholder having their own technologies that solve their own problems that they're able to use across all of their projects or studies. And it's going to be these systems talking to each other and sharing data with each other. And it will be a vendor agnostic environment. And I think that anyone who doesn't look at that concept doesn't see that that really is the only thing that works. I just feel like you've got blinders on. If you're a vendor and you're thinking that we're going to build all sides of the equation and it's going to be so great that everyone's going to use only us and we're going to just literally own the industry and the business, then that's nearsightedness. There's no way that that's actually going to happen.
Almost like we really need to break down the silos that we've created in this industry for our tech. Like everyone's got their own little pot and they're all working within their pot, but we're trying to make like a melting pot of tech.
Well, one of the things I can say is DTRA, which we're a member of, there are initiatives to work on standardization of interconnectivity between systems. Sometimes I feel like maybe we're wasting our time because, while we're going to put together a standard and we're going to deliver that to the industry, are the vendors going to get on board and use it? And I hope they do. And I think eventually they're going to have to, because all we need is for a few vendors to take on this methodology and start doing it. And for the stakeholders that utilize this methodology to see the unbelievable benefits of it. And then you're going to be left behind if you don't get on board.
We're finding it on the site level too. I really want to try to create guidances for finance so that we can all try to be on the same page when we do guidances. But that's the thing about a guidance. This is just a guidance. It's not a mandate. You have to find enough people who feel as strongly about it as you do, who are willing to follow these guidances because they see that this could be very helpful for the industry. How many primary stakeholders do you think we'd see really in research? You've got site, sponsor, CRO, and patient. Those are the four that come to mind. And physician is kind of bundled under site. Among those four, what do you perceive as the roles that each of them need to adopt or have so that we can successfully adopt technology in our industry?
I think we could probably take patient out of the conversation because they don't have a lot of control over this process. Although I am wanting to put tools into the patient's hands that make them more successful. So I think we're really talking about three of the big stakeholders, which are the sponsors, the CROs, and the sites. But I mean, can we not consider vendors part of the stakeholder group?
Absolutely.
Because look at, say, any clinical trial that's being managed by a CRO or sponsor, that you've got so many different vendors that they work with to help make that trial a possibility. And all of it is ripe for being improved with technology. I think that number one, you want to just always seek out the solutions that really work for you and your business and for the processes that you're trying to manage with technology. Finding that technology is step one. And I think that a lot of people people, a lot of these stakeholders, I should say, really don't actually put enough time into vetting the technology that they bring in to make sure that it is going to meet the needs. But I think you also have to do a good job of evaluating your needs. And the needs of a CRO or a sponsor that are running a clinical trial also include the needs of the site. So if you are going to engage in technology that you're going to push down to the sites, part of that wish list needs to make sure that the technology really is going to work for the sites and provide something that's going to help them be successful for you. Their success is your success. And that's the challenge of what we're trying to solve here is we're trying to solve something that's a level above that, not just what works for me, but what contributes to an ecosystem of technology that allows all of the stakeholders of a clinical trial to be able to have their technologies that work for them and make them successful, but still allows us to work together and share these important deliverables back and forth with each other. I don't think that is something that's really thought about a whole lot. It's something that I think is talked about more and more, but unfortunately, it's just not being thought of on a scale yet that it's actually turned into meaningful work. And that's what I always get really frustrated about is that we can all sit here, you and me, lots of other people can talk about what this utopian state would look like, but we're not actually doing anything to get there. It's just talk. And it's just like, oh yeah, that'd be amazing. But the vendors, the sponsors, the CROs, I guess you could say the sites, we're not really actually doing anything to spur this change and make it happen. And so I would love to be able to sit down with a lot of the CROs and the sponsors and even some of the sponsor CRO vendors and say, if you can look down the periscope here and you can see what the future looks like and that this is what we need to get to, then why are we not working on it today? Why are we not trying to get there?
It's kind of like herding cats sometimes where everyone has their own initiative. Like you said, it's important to know what you need in technology, but it's also important to understand what someone else might need. And I see a balance between people not being afraid to speak up for what they need, and then people also being willing to listen to all of their counterparts to understand their needs for more of like a holistic solution.
Yeah.
I've been going through this change in understanding at CRPN where I realized I can't change the world. I cannot make everyone do what I hope can solve these problems. So the very best thing I can do is create the best possible little micro ecosystem of sponsors and sites so that we can demonstrate such quality and efficiency that other people will want to join. Maybe we could do that on a technology level where you just create a small alliance or a consortium of groups who want to do this, and you demonstrate yourself so much in the industry that everyone starts to look at you as a standard. Otherwise, I think we're all just living in our own little silos. Everyone's doing a giant tug of war with control, power, money, technology, business. It seems like we're all just kind of fighting each other, and therefore the trials suffer.
Absolutely. I think even if we could do this on a small scale with a few vendors that could demonstrate it and put it into practice, basically a case study that we could share with the world, that would be a really neat opportunity. And just so you and anybody else listening to this show know, Real Time is on board with being a participant in such a case study and actually demonstrating how this would work and that it can be done.
For any of my CRPN site partners out there, I own Land of Lincoln Clinical Research, and I will gladly sign up for that kind of a consortium. If anyone wants to start this technology alliance, let's have a chat. If we can't solve the industry, we'll make our own standards in a small group and then make that adoptable by all of the people who respect what we do.
What we really need is sites, folks like you that can be a part of this, but we need some of the sponsor level folks to get involved. So I'd love to have any eTMF vendor that wants to work on a standardized connectivity model for ISF to connect to eTMF. We'd love to work with you and build that model. Same thing for EDC. If there's any EDC companies out there that would love to consume site source data and have data flow from an electronic source document directly into your EDC system, we would love to build out that technology with you in a way that it can be shared with everyone and everyone could adopt it. So it wouldn't be a one-to-one connection. It would be a many-to-many connection.
Perfect. So Rick, if I were to give you the microphone and I just said, tell the industry how you feel about technology development and adoption in clinical research, what would you say?
It's exciting times. There is a lot of technology coming into our business. The pendulum will swing. We will figure it out. It always happens so much slower than we all want it to. Technology is supposed to be something that happens really rapidly, but when we're trying to take an industry that I feel like is still working a decade behind. It's just going to take some more time. But hopefully we can all put our heads together, have more meaningful conversations that actually turn into action. And then if we can come together and put action plans in place to really solve some of these problems that we know all exist, and we're all smart folks, I think we can come up with smart solutions. From where I'm sitting, there's not enough work being done to really get us to that place. I hope that conversations like what you and I are having today, and probably many, many more to come, will start to make that pendulum swing a little bit faster.
You know, Rick, if I didn't know that we were talking about technology right now, I could have sworn you were just talking about the SOS conference. It's the exact same principles.
I'm a fan of anyone trying to make the site's life better. I feel like when I do talk to sponsors and CROs, I know we all have our own problems and we all have our own challenges. And it's probably really hard to work at a CRO just like it is to work at a site. But sites work so hard. I mean, blood, sweat, and tears go into trying to be successful on these studies and find the patients and conduct the visits and meet the requirements of the FDA and the protocol, and ultimately collect this incredibly valuable data so we can advance medicine. I wish that sponsors and CROs would value the work and the commitment that sites bring every day for the success of their trials. And with that knowledge, give them more tools to be successful on their behalf.
Rick, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central. I love the conversation. It was awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
This episode of CRPN Central is brought to you by Save Our Sites. Save Our Sites is founded by clinical site administrators. It's 4 sites, and we want to make sure that we can reduce every possible barrier for our clinical site administrators to come to a conference, talk about what they need, and get something done. February 2nd, 2024, Tucson, Arizona. Please consider registering. For more information, go to saveoursites.com. Our next guest has developed and implemented clinical trial technology for years. Doug Bain is the Chief Technology Officer of the mid-size CRO, KCR Clinical Development. Doug's previous experience at ERT, Metadata, and eClinical Health as a software developer's perspective, and now at KCR, gives him a unique viewpoint toward our industry's current operations and the future of clinical research technology. As a result, his technology and innovation department is dedicated to developing the industry's next generation clinical trial and patient site engagement technologies. Please welcome with me, Mr. Doug Bain. Mr. Doug Bain, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central today.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Very glad to be here.
Doug, for the audience, would you introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Doug Bain. I'm Chief Technology Officer here at KCR. KCR is a mid-sized CRO, and my role at KCR is, well, I run a department called Technology and Innovation. Well, I suppose the title gives it away. I'm responsible for technology and some of the innovation at the company. My background, though, is primarily software development. So I'm a tech head. I have developed systems in clinical research since 1996. And it's only just over 3 years ago, I joined a CRO to take some of my former skills and apply them to digitalizing KCR, which has been interesting, eye-opening, informative. I've learned a lot. It's taken away maybe some of the frustrations that software developers sometimes face. They don't actually get hands-on involvement, in this case, running clinical trials. So we have this image of how our software might be used, but in reality, it's not up to us to do the execution. Whereas as a consumer of the software, I am hands-on. I do see how clinical trials can be positively affected with the right application of technology. So it's been fun.
Doug, it sounds like you have a very good and interesting background, not only in technology, but now you're starting to grow that into clinical research. From a site's perspective, it feels like software has really exploded in so many different ways and the technology has grown. How did you experience that revolution?
I started writing or developing clinical research systems back in 1996.
Wow.
It seems like a long time ago now, but that was developing on some of the early internet-based systems. And during the course of the 2000s, we've moved more and more towards towards what people call cloud technologies. The difference is the power of the browser. Nowadays, most people, doesn't matter whether you're doing word processing or accounting, you open up your browser, you enter a URL in, and you're off and running. You don't install any software. You've paid for your license by user subscription, things like that. And that makes the potential take-up or the deployment of software so much easier, which is, I suppose, achieved the prevalence of different software products, in our case in clinical trials, which I think has been good and bad. My major drive right now is not to increase the number of products, it's to consolidate the products, to bring them together, to avoid, from the site's perspective, the frustration of so many companies throwing lots of technology at the sites, and for the sites to then have to pick up the pieces and try to make sense out of it from trial to trial. And there is a path. I recently spoke at the Association of Clinical Data Management conference in Barcelona, and one of the primary themes of my discussion was to explain how technology has evolved to the point where instead of using one system, people are quite often using 5 or 6 systems on a single clinical trial. And software vendors, let's imagine they develop an EDC system. EDC systems take a while to pick up and get off the ground because you might be running a pilot for 2 or 3 years. You might have a sponsor that then says, oh, that was good, let's run 2 or 3 more studies. And it could take 5 or 6 years before you really see traction with your product. And of course, at the end of that 5 or 6 year period, you might discover that the technology you based your EDC system on is old. And so you'll develop another technology, which will be different than your first technology, and you'll sort of try to hook them together. And what can end up is, over time, you end up with a whole host of products that may have a common logo, may even have a common look and feel, but they're completely different technologies. And this is where the problems start. The other issue is, of course, silos, clinical research, a lot of companies. And by the way, I started up a company in 2012 and I developed a single platform, but I was told by pharma, this is great, this is really tremendous, but you're going to have to sell your system to another 7 directors of departments because they all make their own decisions. And I realized that having a great platform was just a small step. Having a means to be able to get that platform over the line with the sponsors, with the CROs, was harder, actually.
You said that, I guess you were talking to sponsors and they said this is really great, but you'll have to go talk to these other departments.
Yeah, because
that means that there's sponsors whose departments use different technologies?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Because
holy moly.
Within almost every CRO and every sponsor company, you will have a pharmacovigilance department team. You'll have a data management team and so on. And each of these departments have different requirements. You have a clinical trial management system that is used not by the data management team, but will be used by clinical operations team. And the CRAs will use, a particular function of the CTMS to support the monitoring visit reports and so on. So these are all different pieces of software that were originally typically procured individually, but increasingly are coming from the same companies. Even if they come from the same company, generally they tend to be independent because it's easier to sell an independent product than to try to sell a product that's dependent on other products.
Do you see almost a reluctance in technology adoption in clinical research from a site level, from a sponsor level, from a CRO level?
It depends who the stakeholders are. If you have a problem and you see some technology that's going to solve that problem, you're going to go, yeah, good, I like it. But let's imagine you're asked to support as a site a clinical trial and you're delivered some tech that you've never seen. You can't see how that's solving any of your problems. You're going to go, oh, great, here comes another one. And that, I think, has been a lot of the problems, is that clinical trials involve multiple stakeholders, but not every stakeholder, or in particular the stakeholder who's responsible for the procurement of software, is necessarily considering or is even knowledgeable about the requirements of every other stakeholder. Wow. And that's where sites increasingly are saying, I need software, I need tech to fix my problems.
You said that it could take 2 weeks in development for an EDC to form. What's the life cycle of technology development from start to finish?
Let's talk about the development of the software and then the implementation of the software for a study. The development of an EDC system, it takes years. I don't even like to talk about them, perfectly honest, because I don't like companies that saying, saying, right, here we go. I think I can create a better EDC system. But the facts are, again, going back to my experience, I said I wrote a platform, and that platform captured data in a clinical trial. And I purposely didn't call it EDC because if I didn't call it EDC, nobody would buy it. And I found that out after 2 years. I called it a data capture module. So it did ePro and it did EDC and it did other captures. That was in a clinical trial, but people wanted to buy an EDC system because that's what their RFP said. By stating that your software products have to fulfill a particular silo drives you down this route of persisting your silo. But that means that you have potentially disconnected modules, products. And some organizations, some stakeholders are suffering more than others. In your case, sites suffer more than others because you have no choice. The sponsors and CROs are making the choice for you.
It does get frustrating on the site level. It also feels like it gets very frustrating even on the developers level or the software level. Things like everyone is frustrated as far as technology goes because everyone is trying to take their own path. And then at the same time, they're expecting all of those paths to cross and work together.
There are answers, though. I mean, I wouldn't like to speak to you with just one side, which is the problem. I'd rather speak to you about the potential solution to the problem. And the answer is to develop what I would describe as platforms, but modularize the delivery of that platform in some way. And there are companies out there that are doing some of that. But what it also takes is the bringing together of some of the elements that are common. For example, if you have I'm sure you're familiar, RTSM or randomization and trial supply management module, it randomizes your patient and it schedules the delivery of drug to the site to meet the requirements of the study. It should share common information with the EDC system because it's the lack of sharing of that common information is, I think, what gives frustration to the stakeholder sites in particular. Unfortunately, there are companies out there that are projecting this idea of, yes, we have a platform, but you scratch the surface, the platform only goes as deep as the logo and the product, which leads to more frustration for consumers because they think they've bought something and they bought something else.
When it comes to modularization, can we look at another industry who's done that? How can you create a revenue stream? How can you make good business models through modularization?
There's a platform called WordPress, and WordPress is a very commonly used tool to create websites by non-programmers. But it's not just WordPress themselves who are potentially making revenue there. It's all the plugin developers. So you get a theme from there and you get a Shopify thingy over there and so on, and you pull them all together. And there's lots of people, companies in this ecosystem now making a sensible revenue from the fact that you're using parts of different products. I would like to see that happen in the clinical research world, where a company creates a platform, but they don't just think this is my world and nobody can get in, which is unfortunately has been the case. They have to be thinking, no, I'm not just creating an environment where I can create modules for my product. I'm actually creating a pluggable environment that other companies, if you want to do some of these cool DCT things, these DCT companies shouldn't be writing their own platforms, to be honest. I think they should be creating plugins to a centralized environment. That, I think, is going to start to change things. It's good for the platform provider because they will obviously have some growing revenue for their platform, and it's good for the plugin providers because they can say, actually, I don't need to spend 10 years writing a massive platform. I just need to worry about my piece in the puzzle to plug in, and it'd be far better for the sites because they'll log in once, and potentially, if it's done properly, they just log in once.
I know that RTCTMS does that. Some CTMS platforms that are trying to do like the plugin model where it almost allows sites to interchange or to customize the experience based off of what they offer in the trials that they perform. Do you see anything like that growing on the sponsor or the CRO side?
To some extent. So Viva have taken one step, which is the Site Vault product, which is interesting, and that they've provided a component, a sort of self-installable or self-licensable component that allows sites to be able to complete their portion of the trial master file. I think that's a good first step. I think there's a long way to go because sites are obviously saying, I need other capabilities. So there's quite a few site-specific trial management systems out there that are doing far more. And right now, if I owned a site, I would probably say, great, thank you, Viva, but I need my financial management system and I need my patient onboarding tool, my patient database, and all these other bells and whistles in order to do the full remit.
Almost like a one-stop shop technology for sites.
Yeah. We shouldn't just stop necessarily at sites. I feel very strongly, and that was my primary focus actually of the work I did, was to look at what the patients patients need and how the patients can be part of that stakeholder environment. To some degree, all of the stakeholders should sort of have their own ownership of their data. So this idea of having, what I've referred to as a trusted third-party environment where the sponsor doesn't own it, the CRO doesn't own it, the site doesn't own it, the patient doesn't own it. They're all basically just stakeholders participating and being involved in a clinical trial. That, I think, is what we'll see. And I think the trusted third-party model where everyone's basically got a piece of the puzzle and they're all got their own thing, combined with this pluggable platform, is, I think, where things are going to go over the next 10 years, which I think will make life easier for the site.
If we were to go to that third-party environment, what would sponsors be able to own for patents and developments and things like that for their drug?
With the trusted third-party system, the sponsor is not in control of that. They don't say, oh, hold on a minute, let me just pull out the covers and I can dig into this database and I can see everything. In a trusted third-party system, they've just got a restricted role, which in their case is sponsor. So they are blinded basically on PII, PHI, and it doesn't matter what they do, the platform is effectively validated and licensed on the basis of, you're a sponsor, you can't see that. It doesn't matter what you do, you can't change anything. There's nothing configurable, you can't touch that.
It's almost like permissions. You're like a setting of permissions.
And then the site goes, well, hold on, you're a site user, therefore your function is, yes, you do have access to that, and so on. Trusted third party has tended to be restricted to like the ePro systems. I think restricting it to ePro system disables the potential connectivity you might want to have with all the other elements in this ecosystem.
Maybe healthcare has already kind of pioneered that level with the healthcare records versus ownership versus hospitals and doctors.
Yeah, we're super close. The technology is pretty well there, but what we lack is maybe just an application of some of these technologies. It's just a case of almost plugging it all together and making it viable.
We have the development, the technology is there. And I think we kind of touched on it, but why do you think we're not adopting it? Why do you think there's not an uptake of technology in the industry? We talked about silos, we talked about communication. Then we were talking about the modularization where sometimes it feels like you said, everyone wants their own little piece of the pie and they don't want to share. And then as a result, we just have a bunch of little pieces of pie that nobody can eat.
You might have heard something called API, something application program interface. And a lot of vendors go, oh, it doesn't matter. I've solved that problem. I've got an API. That's not a solution. That's just a get out of jail. I can throw that in. Nobody really knows what an API is. I can close off further discussion around about connectivity by using the acronym API. But the reality is it's far, far more involved than that, because API only allows you to transfer data from system A to system B, provided system A and system B are speaking the same language and have also based things on a standard dashboard.
This API interchangeability, the big magic word that everyone talks about, could almost be like that false security where we're thinking, yes, we're going down this pathway for a solution when realistically it just leads us to a dead end.
APIs can be used. They're not the answer. They're not panacea to the problem. What's to me far more of a panacea is saying like one source of data, source of truth. I want one table that has a list of studies and has all the information about a study. If I've got a platform, I want one table. I don't want to be told, oh, there's 4 tables that have studied definitions. And it's up to you to ensure the tables describe the same thing, because if they don't describe the same thing, then the APIs won't work. That's the sort of stuff that shouldn't exist today. We shouldn't have a so-called platform that has duplication of data.
I wonder if sometimes there are also some legal barriers in between the integration of technology among so many stakeholders. This goes back to that magic independent contractor word. As an independent contractor, sites have, I guess, the legal right at least to perform their services without interference. Nobody else is responsible or liable for their actions, and so therefore they're the ones that have to choose the technology to perform their services according to protocol. But it seems like in the industry, since we call them sponsors and since they throw a lot of money at it, we've kind of given them that golden torch saying, we'll just use whatever you tell us to use. And I think that that's creating this really weird system where, well, not only are sites just bogged down because every single sponsor wants them to do a different technology, but now the sponsors are paying for all this. They're expecting the sites to use it. And then the sites are saying, well, this is our choice, this is what we're doing. This really weird catch-22, not only on a legal level, but also on a misinterpretation of expectations level. level. Who really has that authority to say this is what we are using?
I think you've pointed out, if a site says, I'm going to use this technology, then the sponsor can't really stop them, but the sponsor can choose whether to select that site or not select that site. Let's take two of the sort of extremes. But EDC. So EDC is quite technical. So when you set up an EDC system, let's imagine you're doing a mid-sized study. You might have 80 eCRF pages in that EDC system. What I'm saying is setting these systems up to capture the data, it takes 8 to 12 weeks to set these up. So if a site wants to go and do that, good luck to them. It's quite hard work. You want to make sure that the data that comes out of these systems is consistent. So generally, a CRO sponsor won't use more than one EDC system. So that's why, from the EDC system's perspective, CROs and sponsors will say, no, you have to use this system, because they see how difficult it would be to get data from system A to system B. They just don't do it. Let's look at another side, though, e-consent. Mm-hmm. E-consent's an interesting one, because some of the bigger site networks, they've gone, as a site network, we've recognized that our sites have a real headache managing consent, and we're going to fix that problem. And so they will license or even develop their own e-consent system, and they'll say to their sponsors, right, well, thank you for that consent form. We're going to feed it into our e-consent system, and that's how we're going to do the consenting. So I can see how that would work. And because e-consent is newer, it's not as if every sponsor is saying we've got EDC with e-consent. Sites have a problem using technology. They're going, we're going to try and solve it ourselves. And it might solve it for themselves in some smaller way, but it doesn't necessarily fix it for the whole industry. Picture. It doesn't fix it for everyone. And what I'd like to see is technology and the application of technology to fix it for every stakeholder. Yeah. That's what we should be aiming towards. And I think pushing back, as Brad Hightower and yourself have sort of been vocal about, pushing back to the sponsors and to the vendors saying, look, that's not good enough. Do better for the sites. That is a good thing, because that will hopefully balance out. When sponsors are going, right, we're going to pick a new blah, blah, blah system, they're going to go, what about the sites think?
More of like a holistic approach. That would be my dream too, is eventually to have it to the point where sites can approach sponsors and say, these are all the technologies that we're compatible with. And just like what you were saying, that modularization, the sponsors and CROs can say, okay, we're fully compatible with all of these things the site is working with. There can be almost like an industry standard that's set between sites, sponsors, and CROs, so we can all literally kind of talk on the same page.
No, absolutely. I mean, maybe a simple app, or I say simple, it's actually really, really difficult, but electronic health records. I think sponsors and CROs and vendors, they between themselves will go, right, we can start applying standard feeds of data. So you could say, right, this EDC enabled study is going to support feeds from Cerner or from Epic and Cerner. And if you happen to be a site and you're using one of these systems, you'll go, great, okay, I can transfer some of my medical record information by pressing this button.
Saves so many hours.
Now it's enabled from the study. So that, I think that will start to evolve as the standards start to evolve, where the mappings are maybe less and less onerous.
Well, I'm waiting to see what's going to happen with AI and machine learning and what we can do with these data as well. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that certainly is. I'm not going into that one right now.
Well, if I could just give you the microphone and you wanted to talk to site sponsors and CROs about how to make this better, what would you tell them?
We lack honest dialogue around about what's good and bad. And I think the more people that speak up to say, this is not good enough, the better. We should just honest discussions across industry, because it's these honest discussions that will allow us to say, right, that's a problem, let's fix that. If the developers, the vendors are not hearing that, or even the sponsors to some extent are not hearing that, they're not going to even consider fixing it. So let's have an honest public dialogue about what's good and what's bad, and let's start fixing the problems.
I agree. Constant, clear, transparent, intentional communication, trying to fix a problem. I think that's a very good idea, Doug. Well, Doug, thank you for coming to CRPN Central. It was an honor to have you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
My honor.
Bye. Rick has worked in the industry and advocated for site-facing technology solutions for over 20 years. Sites are not necessarily reluctant to adopt technology. However, they often resist sponsor or CRO mandated talk-down tech, primarily because these technology solutions do not solve site needs or performance requirements. Technology sites do adopt may cost an initial investment. However, it creates such efficiencies in organization that Overall, it almost always makes money for sites willing to embrace it. The best solutions come from developers who walk in the shoes of their end users, and Rick's overall dream is vendor-agnostic utopias that adequately address the needs of each stakeholder. Any tech developer who doesn't see this suffers from a severe case of nearsightedness, and to really move the needle, we need a holistic group of industry stakeholders willing to come together, develop, and adopt a fully interchangeable industry standardized connectivity model for the many-to-many connections we need to accomplish efficient and streamlined clinical trials. Doug has programmed and developed technology and research for decades. Developers do not generally have an understanding of clinical trial logistics when they create software. However, now that he is also on the consumer side of clinical research software, he is acquiring an intuitive understanding not only behind the development of the software, but also for the logistical needs successful softwares require. Current software procurement is heavily siloed and tends to accomplish the objectives requested by the creators and targeted audience. However, it doesn't necessarily meet the needs of every stakeholder who interacts with the technology. Doug envisions a future technology environment of modularization and trusted third-party platforms that allow each stakeholder to access and receive the information and management they need to succeed. These pluggable environments will require our industry to be fully interchangeable and interact with each other with a single source of truth. To accomplish this future, it's important for all stakeholders to fully communicate their needs and to have a voice at the development table for open and honest discussions. Our interviewees answered each of today's questions with similar answers and principles. Technology adoption is limited because it is not developed to meet the needs of everyone involved. As a result, successful technology development requires a comprehensive and equal understanding of every stakeholder involved. An efficient future of clinical research technology requires vendor-agnostic, modularization type of pluggable environments with universal interchangeability between all user stakeholders and solution providers. Finally, to make real change, we need to continue candid conversations among the industry and come together to organize a consortium committed to an industry-level technology standardization. So, what exactly is preventing our clinical research industry from freely adopting the latest innovations and technology that we have to offer? The resounding answer from our guests is simply fragmentation and silos. Technology developers are focused solely on solving the problems of their procurers and, as a result, suffer from nearsightedness into the holistic needs of the entire ecosystem. If we want to accomplish efficient clinical research at a global scale, we must develop a synergistic solution not only to isolate and protect our little kingdoms from the world, but rather to join together as an industry to lift each other up and truly progress clinical research as a whole. Nobody said this envisioned utopia would be easy to accomplish. There are reasons why we build our walls between each other. However, it only takes a handful of dedicated and passionate groups to come together in unity and to begin an initiative that could revolutionize clinical research technology as we know it. I, for one, will gladly contribute what I can to help advance our industry's capability to serve our patients not only for today, but for decades to come. All right, everyone, thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope that our conversations today will spark initiatives throughout our audience, and I invite anyone interested in a technology consortium to reach out and to help us organize an effort for real and progressive change. Thank you so much to Rick and Doug for participating and for sharing their stories and opinions. Thank you to our community voice volunteers, Erica Bersin and Val Torres, for helping us with the episode's introductory skit. Finally, thank you to MedVector and to Peterson Research Consulting for helping to make this podcast possible. Please join our voice of change at the SOS Save Our Sites conference. Register today at www.saveoursites.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on CRPN Central.